said, I am a case manager, so I just want to point that out. I'm not a licensed therapist yet, and I am not a psychiatrist, but I have been working in the mental health field for about almost 4 years, and it is one of the biggest passions of mine. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about everything today. So balancing mental health is already a huge challenge, and when you add switching to teleworking, that is a huge adjustment, and it comes with many, many changes, and it's different for everyone. So we're going to be talking about how to balance this new normal and practice self-care all at the same time, which can be really overwhelming. So some of the goals for today are to identify parts of the brain, super exciting, that are affected by stress and anxiety, and how to combat that stress by identifying coping skills and self-care interventions. So we're going to start out by talking about the anatomy of stress and anxiety. And again, I had to brush my knowledge up when making this slide because I love talking about the brain, but it's a lot to remember. So we're just going to go over the very basics of how our brain works when we're presented with stress. So there's something in our brain called the thalamus, which is the central hub for sights and sounds. So this is what kind of takes in our environment around us and sends it to the cortex, which is the part of our brain that attributes meaning to what we're taking in our environment. And then our lovely amygdala, which plays a huge part in our anxiety responses, is the emotional core of our brain. So this is kind of what triggers our fight or flight response, which we've all heard of. Basically, if you're in the woods and you see a bear, are you going to fight the bear? Are you going to run away from the bear and leave it alone? Or are you going to freeze and have no idea what to do? So this is a natural response that has kept us alive and going. It's a good thing to have anxiety in certain times, but when it sticks around for too long, that's when it becomes a problem. And our hippocampus kind of takes all of these responses I've just talked about and stores it in our memory in different file cabinets in our brain, so that if you see that thing again that caused you anxiety, it's going to immediately start these responses without you even being conscious of it. And then our prefrontal cortex, which is an amazing part of our brain right up here in the front, this is the part that takes the longest to develop, which is why our lovely teenagers that we all work with make some not so great choices sometimes. We've all been there, but this is our conscious mind that has a lot to do with making decisions, and it's like the logical part of our brain. So when we're in a stress response, this part of our brain completely shuts down. While that's happening, a lot of our body systems, like our digestive system, completely shuts down because our body needs more energy, and it's pumping more blood to different parts of our body to kind of gear us up for that anxiety response. And I put a picture of a car engine here because I'm not going to pretend I know anything about cars, but I do know that you should definitely not be running your car at the highest max RPM all day, right? Because that would just blow up your engine and your car wouldn't work. So the same thing goes for our bodies. When our hearts are pumping at like full course and we're just going, like if anyone's ever had the horrible experience of having a panic attack, when that's over, whether it was 15 minutes or a half an hour, you feel like you've like run a marathon and you're just completely exhausted because our bodies were running in overdrive. So that's just a little bit about how our brain is involved in our stress response. I think it's really helpful to think about these things because you know that it's not just happening out of nowhere. This is something that our bodies are made to do, but it can become an issue if it's happening too much and for too long. I went to this amazing training. I'm not going to explain this analogy as well as this person did, but it's something that I think about all the time with my clients and with myself. So it's something that you just call, it's just the toaster. So it's talking about how our brain sends us false alarms that we are in current danger right now. So it talks about how maybe back in the day you might have had like an old toaster that had one too many crumbs in the bottom. And every time you make toast in the morning, when your toast pops up and that smoke starts to come out, your smoke alarm goes off. So the alarm is going all through your house. And every time this happens, your brain starts beating really fast, you're breathing really heavy, you run to the kitchen and you're like, oh, it's just the toaster again. Okay. And then you feel this like sense of relief. So the same thing is happening in our bodies when we're experiencing anxiety. So the smoke detector is kind of like the amygdala in our brain. It's just not logically sending us these alarms that there's something wrong and that we're in danger right now, when that's not necessarily the case. And that's what anxiety is all about. So it kind of tricks us into thinking that we need to be responding with our bodies right now to get us out of this danger. So I find that this is a really helpful thing to think about once we're experiencing anxiety and you realize you can kind of talk yourself through it and realize I'm not in trouble right now, it's just the toaster. This is really helpful with teens. And I'm going to share one more analogy that's really helpful with teens. This one always resonates with them, and it's something that they can think of and carry on with them after sessions that I've had with them. And they'll even bring it up, which is really cool. So that one is thinking of your anxiety as a big thorn bush. And showing them this image has been helpful as well. And sometimes they'll ask me to send it to them. One of my teenagers made this the background on her phone, which made my heart smile. But basically, think of your anxiety as a big thorn bush. So your worry is like the watering can of this thorn bush. And the more that you water this thorn bush with your worry, the bigger the thorn bush gets. And it's very hard to get out of it, the bigger it gets. But if you start to practice watering some other plants that you might have, like self-love or acceptance, or maybe practicing some new coping skills, which we'll talk about, those plants will get larger and your thorn bush might start to shrivel a little bit, which means that it will be a lot easier to crawl out of next time. So this is also a really helpful analogy that I've found with working with teens and adults, anybody of any age. So moving on, I love this image, and I feel like many of us will be able to relate that I just constantly feel like I am swimming in cold coffee that I've forgotten about right here. Sticky notes, like I can never find that note from that one meeting that I need right this second because I'm working in 4 different areas and my partner's home and my dogs are barking, and it is just a chaotic environment. And how are we supposed to work in a chaotic environment like that? So I'm going to kind of shift the discussion to working from home. So I think it's really important to realize that our environments are completely overlapping, and this is not supposed to be happening, right? In an ideal world, our work environment, our home environment, our relationships, our children, all of these things are completely overlapping, and we all wear different hats in all of those environments. So now they're just like stacked on top of each other, and we're supposed to know how to manage all of this. You know, I listed here so many different roles. As I was making this slide, I'm just thinking like, you know, I don't have children, but I work with a lot of people that do, and I just can't even imagine some of the things that they're having to go through each day, being a teacher and being a spouse, a partner, a mom, all of these different things. It's a lot to manage. So we're going to talk about a couple different ways to deal with these overwhelming feelings. So I'm a maximalist, and I feel like this slide is really overwhelming, but I'm also very visual. So I liked this a lot, and I also made a list of some working from home survival tips. So I think it's really important, first and foremost, to keep a schedule. This can be really hard to identify in the beginning. I don't know how many weeks in, and I'm still working on this, but I think it's really important to keep a clock out time for the end of the day, because I found myself working until like 8 o'clock at night, and then I had nothing to show for it. So be mindful about what you're going to do for the day and keep a clock out time. Some people might be mad at me for saying this, but change out of your pajamas. Maybe you can keep some comfy pants on, but just make sure that they're clean, because it does make a difference. And I'm sure you've all heard to use breaks, get up and stretch. Wow, Freudian slip right there. Eat real meals, eat food throughout the day, take breaks to eat, and stay hydrated. I noticed that I've been drinking a lot less water. So I've been trying to like have a huge glass next to me with a straw to drink more. And I think Anita might have talked about this like 2 weeks ago, but listen to music. Take advantage of the fact that we're working from home in our own spaces. So listen to podcasts, listen to music, maybe turn YouTube on in the background with some inspirational videos. Those things might help you out. Test it out for once. And also keep in mind to limit your media consumption. Just pay attention to the news outlets that you're reading and maybe limit that to like 30 minutes a day, rather than trying to keep up with the latest news. And dare I say it, spend time with your pets, but maybe spend some time away from them too, because I don't know about you guys, I love my 2 dogs to death, but they've been getting on my nerves a little bit. Don't tell them. So yeah, just a couple tips. And then everybody knows what self-care is, right? But I feel like sometimes that definition of self-care can be limited, and there's a lot that comes into self-care. So it's important to know that self-care is something that's supposed to fuel us. It's supposed to give us energy. It's not something that we're forcing ourselves to do. It's not something that we're not going to enjoy doing. Self-care is going to look different for every single person. And so I listed here the ABCDEs of self-care. So these are just a couple ideas to get you kind of reflecting on what self-care might look like for yourself. So sometimes that might mean stepping away from things that you need a break from, tending to your body, making sure that you're moving, even if that's just like pacing back and forth on an audio call when you can. Take 10 minutes to go outside, get some fresh air, make sure you're eating, like I said, and have some creative outlets. That's really, really important. Do things that refuel you as a person. What makes you feel like you have meaning? What's going to give you joy? Decide what those things are and what is and is not working. And also, I think one of the biggest things is adjusting your expectations for yourself. Make sure that they're realistic. And I know everyone knows you can't pour from an empty cup, but I think it's really important that you need to remember that you can't serve from an empty vessel. And once you fill your own vessel, then that overflow will be able to serve others. So this is what I feel like people think of when self-care is mentioned. Lots of physical things like taking baths, drinking your favorite wine, reading books, using essential oils, face masks, all of these things. But I think it's really, really important to remember how much mental health plays into our self-care. And so self-care can look different. It can look like asking for help when you need it. Sometimes it's hard to know when you need it, but you'll figure it out. And when you do, ask for help. It doesn't make you weak. Knowing when to take a step back, like I mentioned before, forgiving yourself, have grace for yourself. And one thing that I know I struggle with a lot is saying no to people whenever I know that I need to, and setting boundaries. Those are 2 of the biggest things that I struggle with, but are so, so important. And you could ask for help with those. Ask for support from one of your closest coworkers or your boss and say, hey, I really need to practice setting boundaries. When you notice X, can you please say something to me? Just give me a friendly nudge. Those are all things that I think are really important. And we're not really dealing with this so much now, but if someone were to ask you to come out and you feel like you can't do it, say no. It doesn't make you a bad person. So all of these things are really, really important to remember. And then I also feel like it's really important to kind of plan for what might get in the way when you're trying to implement these changes. Because like I said, this is new for all of us. And maybe you were trying to do self-care before all of this COVID quarantine stuff. So now when you add that into the mix, there are things that are going to get in the way of you practicing self-care. So this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that came up for me when I was thinking about this is not scheduling it into your daily schedule, not being part of your normal routine, not feeling supported through your coworkers or employer maybe, and kind of having like a discomfort with asking for that. It's got to be really hard to ask for a day off when you're working from home. I've asked for one, and it was so hard for me to send that email because I was like, why should I be asking off if I'm already home? I could totally do this. No, it's okay to ask off if you need it. And then again, going back to saying no, that superhero mindset, a lot of us will sometimes tell each other, it's more important to help this person and I'll be fine. I can deal with myself later on. That's a huge struggle for people. I know a lot of people that are like that, including myself, and it's a constant work in progress. What else? Oh, comparison and perception. So you might be nervous of what a coworker might be thinking about you or your boss if maybe you didn't get to that one task today. So these are all things that, like, if you don't get that one task done, I think it can go till tomorrow's to-do list and everything will be okay. I don't think your boss would ever think anything negative about you, and I think they would actually be really proud of you for taking care of yourself and doing what's best. So just kind of think about some of these things whenever you're trying to figure out how are you going to practice self-care on a daily basis. So I know I shared a lot of information, so I just made a slide of some of today's takeaways. That self-care is not just baths and face masks, that you need to remember to say no sometimes, treat yourself like a small baby, remember to breathe, nourish your body with healthy foods and water, move your body, and know the power of your inner voice. Didn't talk about that a lot, but your inner voice is very powerful. Identify when you need to ask for help and have grace with yourself. Remember that self-care is not about self-indulgence. It's more about self-preservation. And I put some awesome videos on here. One of them I made, which is targeted towards youth, focusing on their mental health during this time. So that's on there, an article about Zoom fatigue, and some really fun animated videos about mindfulness, which I could talk about forever. So definitely check those out. And if you have any questions, don't feel like shy about reaching out to me. I am here for each and every one of you, and I really, really appreciate you letting me talk today. It's been really, really fun.